Funding for the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is provided by the Energy Communities Alliance.
Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, October 28th, 2024. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. We thank our friends at the Energy Communities Alliance for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. ECA, Local Concerns, National Impact. If you haven't subscribed to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, we invite you to do that now. Community partnership is one of the essential tenets of the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. The Office of Environmental Management depends on the support and goodwill of its host communities to carry out its sizable long-term cleanup mission around the country. EM regularly solicits community input to help guide the cleanup program, including establishing priorities and providing a report card on how DOE is doing in meeting its commitments. One main channel for this input is the Site-Specific Advisory Board, or SSAB. The EM SSAB is governed by the Federal Advisory Committee Act. While only one SSAB was established under the charter, 8 local boards have been established at various DOE sites. These are Hanford, Idaho, Northern New Mexico, Nevada, Oak Ridge, Savannah River, Portsmouth, and Paducah. The chairs and vice chairs and other representatives of the local boards meet with EM officials in person twice a year. The latest meeting was held recently in Oak Ridge. The EM SSAB provides EM senior management with information, advice, and recommendations concerning issues affecting the EM program at various sites. Specifically, the board may provide advice and recommendations concerning EM site-specific issues, including cleanup activities and environmental restoration, waste and nuclear materials management and disposition, excess facilities, future land use, long-term stewardship, risk assessment, and communications. Following the recent Oak Ridge meeting, to learn more about the work of the SSAB, I talked with Kelly Snyder, the designated federal officer for the Site-Specific Advisory Boards. We then had the opportunity to talk with Amy Jones and Chris Bartholomew, the chair and vice chair of the Oak Ridge SSAB. Well, our guest now is Kelly Snyder. And Kelly is the designated federal officer for the Environmental Management Site-Specific Advisory Boards. Hello, Kelly, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're really glad to have you here. You were a guest on our podcast a couple of years ago, and we talked with you then about this topic, but we feel like it's a very important topic and one that we need to revisit. And in particular, since you just came off of one of your twice yearly meetings of all the Site-Specific Advisory Board chairpersons in Oak Ridge, we want to talk to you about that meeting and how that went. So let's just kind of launch in here with starting out with having you just give us some background on the Site-Specific Advisory Boards. How long have they been in existence? How many are there? And why were they formed?
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to say that the advisory boards, the EM site specific advisory board, has been around for 30 years. It's our 30-year anniversary this year. And we are just so excited that we have had the pleasure of being able to work with our community members and hear firsthand how they would like to see us do environmental restoration and waste management activities that are part of the environmental management program. And so these boards are made up of citizens from sites near our EM activities, and they are giving us a firsthand community perspective. They are the stakeholders that live in these communities, and they are there representing their neighbors and their businesses and a wide range of community viewpoints.
And how many boards are there? And can you tell us what sites they represent?
Absolutely. So there is one environmental management site specific advisory board, and it's made up of 8 local boards. And those 8 local boards are located in Hanford, Idaho, northern New Mexico, Nevada, Oak Ridge, Portsmouth, Paducah, and Savannah River.
Okay. And these local boards, in general, about how many members do they have, and how are the members selected? Can you tell us how you set up the board membership in each of the locations?
Absolutely. So when you add all 8 boards up together, we have approximately 200 members. But when you look at each individual local board, they have anywhere from 10 to almost 40 members. Each site gets to determine the size of their board based on their work plan items, the interest from the community, and a number of other factors. So we want to make sure that the boards fit the communities that they're supposed to be representing. And these members are appointed for 2-year terms. And if they'd like to continue to participate after their 2-year term ends, they can reapply for a total of up to 6 years on an advisory board.
Okay, so the members apply to become members of the board, and how are they selected? Who makes the selection?
So the Department of Energy is the deciding entity that gets to appoint the members to the board. But we don't do it in a vacuum. Headquarters in particular is the one who makes the official determination who will be appointed to the board. But we have a large recruitment activity at each of those local boards where we put out information to make sure that anybody who's interested in providing recommendations to us on environmental management activities has that opportunity to apply. And so what we're looking for is a diverse group of stakeholders. We don't want everybody who has the same opinion or viewpoint. We want to make sure that these boards mirror the communities that they're located in. So we look for a variety of ages, education levels, experience levels, viewpoints, gender, ethnicity. We look at everything to make sure that who we are putting on the board truly represents the community that they're representing. We work off the census as well to make sure that we have factual data so we understand exactly how these communities are made up in terms of their demographics.
Okay, so to get a little bit more specific, give us an example of the makeup of the boards. Do you have like business owners, people who work in retail stores? I mean, what kind of people make up the board?
Well, the simple answer is everybody. We don't have a board that has one particular viewpoint. So, for instance, right now on some of our boards, we have stay-at-home parents. We have nuclear engineers. We have first responders. We have elected officials. We have just store owners, or maybe somebody who is with the union, workforce entities. You may have a couple of employees on the board. There's a wide variety of viewpoints that we're trying to obtain.
And these local boards, how often do they meet during the year, and what happens at a typical meeting?
Sure. Well, like we mentioned in the beginning, they meet nationally as an entire group twice a year. But like you just said, they do have local board meetings, and those board meetings are established by each individual site and the board's needs. So we have some boards that meet on a monthly basis. They have a lot of activities that they're working on. They might have a work plan item that's time sensitive, and they need to produce a recommendation for the department within the next 2 or 3 months. And so they might meet more often because they're working towards a specific deadline for a work plan item. Then some of our other boards may meet every other month or once a quarter. So it really just depends on the information that they're currently studying to make a recommendation on.
Okay, and so you just had this meeting in Oak Ridge recently, and this is one of your twice yearly meetings, and that involves the chairs and vice chairs, I guess, of all the boards, all the local boards. Um, what's the purpose of this twice yearly meeting? What do you accomplish in those? What's your goal in bringing all those board chairs together?
I would say the first goal is transparency and open communication. We want to make sure that these different communities have an opportunity to get together and talk about best practices, talk about lessons learned. What's working at one site may or may not work at another, but unless we make sure that those people are communicating and that they can learn from each other, we would be doing a disservice to ourselves if we had these 8 individual boards and never brought them together. Another thing that the purpose of the chairs meeting is for national recommendations. For instance, a site might be making a recommendation that's very specific to their groundwater situation. But there might be a national recommendation that could apply to all of the sites. And so that's what they do when they come together twice a year, is they look to see if there's areas that from a national perspective that the advisory board wants to make a recommendation rather than focusing on the local level.
Well, you mentioned at the beginning that you're celebrating 30 years now of having these boards in place. So, congratulations on that. They must be of significant value to DOE to have them operate for that long of a time. What is your interest in having a board like this in terms of the department? What is your interest in having a board like this, and how does it benefit the environmental management program?
Having an advisory board really is a choice. It's a choice that the department made 30 years ago to include community members in the actual input of making decisions and getting a well-rounded perspective before the department makes its final decision. And so these boards provide a valuable insight that we cannot get from other entities. We can talk to experts, we can talk to people who are proficient or excel in certain areas, so they can tell us, maybe scientifically, what the best options are for us. But they're not going to be able to give us the community's feedback as to what they want to see happen to that land. For instance, we asked them, what would they like the in-use scenario to be? Do they recommend that this area that is being remediated be turned into a wildlife preserve, or should it be used in the future for industrial use? We really need the community's feedback on those type of things. And overall, we make better decisions when it's a collaborative process, when we can hear from those who literally live in communities near our sites, hear firsthand from them what they want and how they want to be involved. It's a win-win.
Well, for the boards to be the most effective, I would assume the members need to be well informed, and one of your goals would be to educate the board members so that they're up to speed on the topics that are involved in environmental cleanup at the various sites. I'm wondering how you do that. Do you have subject matter experts that attend their meetings and brief them on various topics? You take them on tours, or what are the steps you go through to educate your board members?
Yeah, and it is a steep learning curve for many people just because this is a pretty tight subject in terms of, expertise and the technical background. And we are purposely not putting together a technical board. That's not the purpose of this. And so we do spend a lot of time trying to educate our members on the subject of what we're doing and the options that we have to choose from to remediate the areas that we're working on. So it really starts right in the beginning when they first become a member. All of our sites do an orientation, and it varies in time and structure, but typically before they actually go to their first meeting, at that orientation, they're going to learn terminology. They're going to learn the structure of the department and our program. They're going to learn the key activities that site is trying to take on and the remediation activities that are involved. They're also going to get a background on the history of the site. They need to know why we are where we are. And so time is spent on that. And we bring in a variety of people to do those orientations. Sometimes we bring in past members so they can hear from a community perspective, what's happened in the past. We bring in subject matter experts. We might bring in somebody who's an expert in groundwater or somebody who is an expert in geology. We'll bring in a variety of people to come and explain to the board what's happening. And it's really important that we make sure that we take our time to get the information to them as thoroughly as possible. And we do realize that it does take time to get somebody fully immersed in what we do because it is a complex subject. And so that's why we have term limits that start at 2 years, because it does take some time to get comfortable with the subject matter as well as your fellow community members. We often see that our new members are a little quiet in the beginning. Takes a couple of meetings for them to feel comfortable and understand how things work and what's going on at the site. And as they get further into their term, you see them becoming more and more vocal. And be able to feel comfortable expressing their opinions, because we do encourage our members to speak their perspectives and viewpoints and opinions, because a diverse conversation is going to help us make the best decision. If we can hear all of those varying viewpoints and concerns, it gives us as the Department of Energy a better perspective on the entire picture and not just looking at it from one angle.
Am I right that one important form of input from these boards is in the form of recommendations? How is that done? And what do you do with the recommendations that you get from these local boards?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned recommendations, because that's one of the things that I just find just outstanding about this board. So they are chartered to provide recommendations to the Department of Energy. That is their primary purpose, is to give us recommendations from that community point of view. And they have been around for 30 years. And so they've given us nearly 1,800 recommendations in the last 30 years. And of those 1,800 recommendations, 84% have either been completely accepted or partially accepted. And I just love that statistic. I think it's an amazing example of the impact that the board can have on the decision making and what goes into those decisions. And so typically the way a recommendation comes to be is at the beginning of the fiscal year, the department will look at their upcoming work and look to see what they plan to do. And then they look for opportunities for where the advisory board can provide input. And so then they develop a work plan. So each individual site has a work plan, and that's going to outline what they're going to do for the next year. But we don't want to do this just from a department perspective. So we also ask the board, is there things that you would like to make a recommendation on that we haven't brought up and that we haven't included in the work plan? And then there's discussion and dialogue. And after, a meeting and determining what's the best path forward, then the work plan is established for the year. And so what that work plan will do is tell them what they're going to work on at what time. Because as you can imagine, some of the things that we work on are time sensitive. For instance, we ask each of the local boards to give us a recommendation regarding the upcoming budget and what is their priorities for that budget. So for instance, we're in fiscal year 2025. So in the springtime, we're going to be asking each of the local boards for their priorities for the fiscal year 2027 work that's going to be done based on the budget that we receive. And so we're constantly trying to make sure that we have work plan items that have substance to them, that there is a way that their recommendation can make a difference in the actual activities. And then some work plan items and recommendations that come to us may be related to communication and how they'd like us to do outreach in the community. Or we may get recommendations on how they'd like us to do radioactive waste verification. I mean, it really can just vary in so many different areas.
Can you give us an example or two about these recommendations that maybe have made a difference in a cleanup project, something that would sort of underscore the value that the group brings based on their recommendations?
Absolutely. So we've had a variety of situations where the board has made a really big impact, not only to the project in terms of how we do the project, but also onto the financial side of the project. So there's been different situations where we will bring examples to the board or let's call it options to the board. We want to take down a certain building at their site, and there are 3 options that we think are all viable. And we present those to the board and we say, these are our 3 options that we're considering. Option A may be more expensive than option B, but option C might be at a more stringent level to which we're cleaning up. We talk about what the use of that building is going to be afterwards. We discuss the dollars that we think are involved, and then they give us a recommendation. And so we've seen recommendations that have come in where the community felt that the cleanup needed to be at a lower level than we had anticipated. They felt like that land would never be used for the general public, that it was going to be zoned for industrial. And so they wanted it to be remediated to industrial standards rather than residential or things like that. And that makes a big difference. This is that opportunity where we get to actually speak to the board and they give us a recommendation that has real consequences on the future of what takes place in that area. We've also had boards that have given us recommendations on where to install a groundwater monitoring well. There's been areas where community members have felt like they wanted additional information about the monitoring and the information that was being collected from the groundwater. And we asked the board if they could please, do research. We would help them and give them any experts that they were interested in speaking to. And they cited the location of a groundwater well, which I think that's pretty extraordinary that we can do things like that. And that well has been very useful. We've gained so much knowledge from that well. So there's a lot of different things. We get recommendations on how to improve our website, or how we should communicate information and what fact sheets should we have. We also get recommendations on how they would like to see our auditors enhance their visual verification of waste packaging. I mean, it's all over the board, and they all have an impact. They all play into our decision making, and we make better decisions with their input.
Well, what's the vibe, the general vibe within these groups? Do you find them to be positive and supportive of the cleanup program, or are there some members that question the program and some of the hazards or dangers that it entails? What's the nature of the group in general in terms of support for the program?
Well, because the individual local boards are very diverse, we're putting a variety of opinions and viewpoints on that board. It's part of our charter that we have to have a diverse board. And Frankly, there are people who fully support our program, and then there's other members who are a little cautious. They don't feel like they know enough about what we do, and they've joined the board to get more information. We've had people who are really passionate about certain things, and that has made them, have their various opinions. And so I can't say as a whole that, oh, all of the board members support everything we do, or that the opposite of that, and it's very, controversial. It's really neither. It's right there in the middle. And that's what we're looking for in our board members, is somebody who can come and speak their opinion, even if it's not the popular opinion or the most common, and that they're willing to work with their community members to come up with a recommendation. One of the things that's very important for me is that volunteers, because they are all volunteers on the board, they are not paid to do this, that all of these volunteers feel it's worth their time to be on the board. So I try to routinely check in with members. How is it working at your site? Are you happy with how things are going? Do you feel heard? Do you know what your purpose is on the board? Those things are so important. And I also try, when I can, to go in and find out when a member is at the end of their term, was this worth your time? Did you feel like this was a valuable use of those precious hours that we get, to choose what we want to do with our own personal life? And overall, I would say the majority of people felt that being a board member was worth their time. They may not agree with us. They may not like the last decision that was made, or they may love all of the decisions that were made. But when they feel like they were at least heard and part of the process, that's really what we want to make sure that people are getting from being on this board.
If there's somebody out there watching or listening to this podcast now who might be interested in joining one of the boards, what would be your message or advice to them?
Apply, please apply. Most of our boards do an annual or a semi-annual recruitment. We are looking for everyone. There is not a specific type of person or viewpoint that we are looking for. If you are interested in being a voice in your community for environmental management related activities, please apply. We want to hear from you. And each local board has a website. And so applications are available, and information on how to apply is on each of the individual websites, or they could go to the head website, the Environmental Management Site Specific Advisory Board website, and all of the contact information is there as well for how you can apply. So if you're not sure if there's an advisory board in your area, please reach out to me. I'm happy to let you know if there's one in your area, if you're interested in participating in, and I can get you to the right person so that you can learn more about the activities and then decide if you'd like to apply.
Well, Kelly, you've given us an excellent description of the site-specific advisory boards and what they do for the environmental cleanup program. The statistic on the recommendations, 1,800 recommendations over 30 years, with 84% of those either being completely or partially accepted, is very impressive. And these boards obviously provide a lot of value and important feedback for DOE, and we're glad to learn more about them today. I want to really thank you for joining us on the podcast. Kelly Snyder, Designated Federal Officer for the EM Site-Specific Advisory Board. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for letting me come on and talk about the program. I love it, and I want more people to know about it.
We're talking now with two of the leaders of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. We're happy to have with us today Amy Jones, who serves as chair of the board, and Chris Bartholomew, who's the vice chair. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for having us.
Well, we're glad to have you, and we want to get into a little bit of the detail about a local board. There are a number of these boards at sites around the country, and we wanted to focus in on one board in particular, and I wanted to talk with you in Oak Ridge and Since you had the meeting there last month of all the site-specific advisory board officials from around the country, you had quite a good-sized meeting there recently, and we wanted to get your perspective on what's going on in Oak Ridge. Let's start by talking about your own background. So let's talk about you a minute. I'd like to hear about your background, each of you, and what led you to get involved in the site-specific advisory board. And Amy, let's start with you.
Well, currently I am the agency manager for an insurance agency, but I've owned my own business for over 25 years before I got into insurance. And before that, I was an accountant by trade. So really what got me interested in it was during the time that I owned my own business, we had several friends that had worked out at the, as we call it now, the reservation. And they used to tell me stories about things that happened out there and how they would dispose of certain things. And honestly, it made me wonder when they started the cleanup how they were going to deal with some of the stuff that I had heard. So, and a friend had told me about the board. I think Chris had probably the same friend. And that's really what got me into it was the fact that, all these stories I had heard.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Chris?
Yeah, so my background, I have been in construction my whole adult life, I guess, and general contractor, and I own a plumbing business, and in that line of work, a lot of building a T-deck, that kind of thing, environmental stuff. And what got me interested, I live by the way a crow flies. I'm really close proximity to the reservation, and I'm on a well, and I had heard things, and I had my well tested, and some things just kind of I thought, as close as I am, I've lived here my whole life. I need to be I'm interested in it, and I got looking, and I actually saw an advertisement. They were looking for board members, and I started, looking into that, and it intrigued me, and I felt like part of the community, something I should be doing.
All right, very good. Tell us about the application process. Who did you apply to? You said you saw an ad in the newspaper. What was the process for becoming a board member?
Yeah, actually, it was on Facebook. I saw the ad. They had ran an advertisement, and so I just contacted the people on the Facebook through Facebook, and they responded and sent me an email link, and then you fill out. It was pretty straightforward as far as that goes. They don't make it too hard to fill out the application. The approval process takes some time for sure. But it's nothing too complicated,
Is there an interview involved at all?
I don't believe there was an interview other than some back and forth, maybe on the phone a couple times, and I did attend some meetings before I was a member. But yeah, we didn't sit down I don't think a formal interview.
Mm-hmm. Amy, you have anything to add about what the process you went through?
Basically, it was the same as Chris's. I did the application. There was not a sit down interview, but there again was back and forth on the phone or via email with our local people.
Okay. How many members does the Oak Ridge Advisory Board have? And tell me a little bit about their backgrounds just in general.
Currently, we have 19 members. Hopefully by December, we'll be at a full board, which is, if I remember correctly, is 23. We have people from construction. We have a lady that actually is over the Oak Ridge Chamber of Commerce. We have retired people. We actually have a couple that actually worked out on the reservation. And their perspectives are very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I happen to know a couple of your board members. Harold Connor has been a friend of mine for a long time, and I know Harold. He's had decades in the nuclear industry, so and was actually the plant manager at K25 at one point in his career, and then Tom Tuck, who's a banker, and I've known Tom for a long time. So you have people with a lot of varied backgrounds and bringing different perspectives to their view of what's going on in the cleanup.
Yes.
That is true. And Harold, let me tell you, he is a knowledge of, full of knowledge.
Right. Yeah, he's a kind of a walking encyclopedia. I've known Harold a long time. How often do you meet, and what's the normal agenda for your meetings? What happens when you have your meetings?
Chris, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. So we have a monthly board meeting for the normal board meetings. And on that, we discuss, usually there's a topic that we've, got set aside to talk about. There'll be a speaker that'll bring, information on that topic from DOE or from, DOD, whoever it might be. And we'll discuss that, have open discussion on that. There's opportunity for public to have input. And then there's also meetings we have that are stewardship meetings that are sometimes on specific topics, that are more in depth than our board meetings.
How are the topics selected? Does DOE choose the topic, or does the board ask for certain topics? How does that work?
Well, it actually works both ways. We will do our annual meeting and we will discuss the things that we would like to see. Then that request is sent to our DOD, and then they come back and let us know what topics that we'll be discussing for the next year, basically. But usually, if there's a topic that we have requested that does not make that year, usually we are given a reason why, or that it would be discussed at a later date.
Mm-hmm. And how do you get information from DOE, the various ways? So they send speakers or experts to your meetings to talk to you, and I assume you would go out on site tours at various times. Tell us about how you get the information.
So,
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, they like you said, they will be at our meetings. There's almost always someone there from DOE, and also they send out a weekly newsletter. It's called Tuesday News Day, and we get correspondence from the incoming correspondence, that are responses or that have to do with the EM missions going on currently. They email those to us, and so and like you said, there are site tours that we go on pretty regular and see the progress of cleanup and on site.
Mm-hmm. I guess I would assume DOE is looking for your input. That's why the board exists. They want to have a outside community perspective of what's going on from your standpoint and how you're viewing the cleanup program. And they ask for your feedback and recommendations, right? How do you come up with your recommendations, and how responsive is DOE to those recommendations?
So our recommendations come from our EM Stewardship Committee. Usually there are issue groups. So usually, like Chris and I being chair and vice chair, we're on all the issue groups. But yeah, our board members are allowed to choose different issue groups that they want to be on and voice opinions about or be involved in. For example, like the budget, and that's the one that we do a lot of recommendation on every year. They go through the EM steers. Well, first we do the board meeting and we get all the information. Then there's the in-depth meeting with the EM stewardship. And then from there, they either make a recommendation or don't make a recommendation depending on the information given. The budget is one that we usually make recommendations on of where we would like to see the money go. They are very responsive on that, I will say. I have always gotten an answer back since I've been on the board. It may not have come directly to me. It may have gone to the chair because most of those go to the chair, but we have access to those. That's where the correspondence come in. Like if I get a correspondence now as being chair, Chris can request for that correspondence or they are sent out. So we can see everything that goes back and forth between DOE and the board.
Okay. Well, you would have a number of recommendations over the time that both of you have been involved with the board. Is there one that sort of stands out to you that you feel like made a significant impact on the cleanup program at Oak Ridge?
For me, just looking back, I've went back and looked at some of the older recommendations since I've been on the board. I've just kind of went back and saw some of those, and for me, there's a mercury treatment facility that's being built, and there was a board recommendation made on that in regards to the capacity and stormwater capacities and everything. And to me, I think that's going to have a huge impact on the treatment of the water, which is a big deal. The mercury is right now. So, yeah, I think.
And for people who may not know, that's a facility that's being built at Y12. Y12 had a lot of mercury going through it in the early days. And a lot of it is still retained in some of the buildings, and it is a potential threat to the local waterways there. And so the mercury treatment facility is under construction now, and it's going to be cleaning up the mercury so it lessens the hazard and allows for cleanup of those buildings. How do you think that having a board like yours benefits DOE and the community? Amy, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it actually gives the community a voice. Let me rephrase that. It gives several communities a voice because, for example, Chris is in Lenore City and I'm actually in Clinton, Rocky Top area. So, and we have people that are in Harriman. So we get to have a voice from several different communities about what's going on out there. I think it gives DOE and I hate to say it this way, but just a plain Jane Doe version of actually what's going on out in the community and what other people are talking about or what other people are telling us that they want to see happen out there. Or there's a lot of times, and I don't know about you, Chris, but there's a lot of times people will come and ask me what we're actually doing out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we are the communicators between the community and DOE is I think our biggest contribution to the board.
I have to go back for just a minute. You said Clinton and the Rocky Top area. A lot of folks out there listening and watching this podcast may wonder what the Rocky Top area is. And I don't think you're talking about Neyland Stadium. You're talking about a town in East Tennessee that actually changed its name to Rocky Top, right?
Yes, sir. Actually, if people don't know, the original name of that town was Coal Creek. And that's when a lot of the mining was going on. Well, in the 1950s, when North Dam came through, the city decided to change the name to Lake City to go along with the dam. Back in 2014, there was a gentleman that came through the town and said, hey, if y'all build a water park and change the name to Rocky Top, you'll be the new Pigeon Forge. And of course, the town decided that was a good decision, and that's what they did. They got with our legislators and they changed the name to Rocky Top.
And so that's a great return address to have on your envelope in Tennessee, Rocky Top, Tennessee. How would you, each of you, how would you assess the cleanup program at Oak Ridge these days, the success of the program from a community standpoint, the work that DOE and its cleanup contractor UCOR are doing there? How would you rate the cleanup as far as the progress is going?
Chris?
I would say from what I can see with our site tours, even in the short time I've been going on site tours, I've seen a lot of progress. The scope of work is huge. I mean, it is. But it appears, I mean, they've got really good safety. The safety has been great. I mean, flawless record there, I think. Yeah, making a lot of progress. I would say I've seen a lot of progress since I've been there.
Amy, you have additional thoughts on that?
Well, actually, yes, I will comment on that. Chris went on a recent tour that where there was an incinerator that had been taken down, and he didn't know anything about it. And I actually remember it. I was on the board back when before it came down. So he sees this larger footprint. I see even a bigger one because I've been on the board almost, well, this is actually, I'm going on my fifth year. So, or sixth year. So, I have seen a lot of change. I've seen a lot of improvement. Seen a lot of buildings come down that really needed to come down. So, and I think UCOR does a fantastic job. I went to a 5-year review on things that they had done last year, and it's truly amazing to see what they have accomplished in 5 years.
What would you say to somebody who's watching or listening to this podcast and may have an interest in joining a site-specific advisory board in Oak Ridge or at another DOE site? What would be your message to somebody who would have an interest like that?
I would tell them to attend some meetings and see what it's about. I mean, where they can go online. All of the meetings are, broadcast, recorded and broadcast both live. So, there's opportunity to see how that works and see some of the impacts happening.
So they could attend. The meetings are open to the public. They could attend a meeting, meet some of the board members, see what kind of topics are being discussed, and if they can't physically get to a meeting, then they could go online and see the same thing, basically, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Um, I'll ask each of you, is there anything else? I want to thank you for joining me today. Thanks for being here and helping us get a look inside one of the local boards. We appreciate that. Is there anything else that you'd like to say or tell our listeners or viewers that I haven't asked you about?
For me, the only thing I could add is maybe I've mentioned the Facebook. There is actually a Facebook page for Oak Ridge Site Specific Advisory Board. And they should maybe get on there and join, and they can get some of the things happening in current events and catch up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Amy?
For me, I agree with Chris. We do have a Facebook page, but I think a lot of the reservations have Facebook pages or websites. I know Savannah has a website. I've been on it to see, the cleanup they're doing, where they're at, and what stages.
The Savannah website? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if the one thing I would say is if you're interested in the environment or what the government, is doing in your area, this is the best place to get most of that information. It's like our local officials are involved, especially our county mayor. I see her at a lot of different events. So you actually get to see the difference from where we started 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago to where we are today and the cleanup that's actually come about. And the fact that they are giving, that property back to the people, whether it be commercial or whether it be environmental, or greenways, things like that, they are giving back the land that was used during the war.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's really important. And a lot of people are interested in that, they want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell somebody to get involved if they can.
Well, Amy Jones, Chair of the SSAB, and Chris Bartholomew, Vice Chair, we thank you again for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you
Thank you, Mike, for having us.
for being here.
Funding for the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is provided by the Energy Communities Alliance.